So with a storm coming up tomorrow, it's supposed to be one of the worst storms to ever hit the state. I was going to talk about this anyway at some stage, but I suppose now is the best time to talk about it. Obviously, there is wind and stuff like that, particularly in the winter time. You can get storms, etc., etc. It's normal thing. It's not unusual. The last time there was snow here a few weeks ago, the media lost the plot. You think, everybody was going to be snowed in the way they were going on for years and years. But yeah, this raises a reasonable question, I suppose, too, in terms of the wind, and supposedly there's going to be a lot of wind tomorrow. But particularly to do with storms and to do with electricity, particularly the main thing. Now, take for example in Cavan and Leitrim. I know Leitrim doesn't exist, but take for example in Leitrim, particularly where there's a lot of forest and a lot of trees, etc., etc. And it's the same in Cavan. I can give you a few examples now in a second, but just bear with me for a second. Every time there's any kind of a bit of wind, the whole electricity grid nearly falls apart. It's the same even with the snow. A lot of snow caused a lot of issues down the other side of the country, down the bottom of the country, down in Cork and Kerry. It caused a lot of issues, and it shouldn't cause a lot of issues. Really, really shouldn't. It really, really shouldn't. It shouldn't be an issue at all. But the main issue too, in Cavan and Leitrim, take this up. Leitrim doesn't exist, just by the way. It's West Cavan, but for argument's sake, we call it Leitrim. But yeah, for argument's sake, we just call it Leitrim. But yeah, but long story short, the problem is in Cavan and Monaghan, and even in Leitrim, as I say, it's a great example, is that the tree branches, are hanging over the power lines, and when the wind comes, obviously they break and they go through the power lines, etc., etc. And the only reason why there's been many instances in Cavan the same way, where there was literally big chunks of trees, branches of trees hanging over the power lines, and many times it was suggested to cut them, etc., etc. And the people who kicked up hell about it and they didn't want it and was told by local authorities were told not to do it, etc., etc., is the Green Party. The Green Party didn't want us doing that. Cutting branches of trees, etc., that were hanging over power lines because the environment, etc., etc. Same with many trees over the last few years. If there was a storm, and say they were uprooted and nearly fell over, and they're not fully tipped over, but they're half nearly tipped over. On the last legs, a bit more would move them over. We couldn't do anything until they were down on the road. So there's a lot of issues there, particularly now in the electricity network. It shouldn't be that if a bit of wind comes along, anyway, the whole electricity grid goes down. And then especially too, we have to talk about too, if we're talking about electricity grid, we can't be in denial, I suppose, in terms of it too, that the data centers are using up so much electricity, the whole electricity for a whole country, take for example. It shouldn't be happening, first of all, because they're not paying any tax here. But long story short, it is happening. And there's loads of blackouts. I suppose in all my life, when I was a young child, etc., etc., the most amount of blackouts I've seen is in recent times, in the last 3 years. There's been a good few blackouts. I think this year alone here, where I am at the moment, there was about 6 or 7 this year, which is a lot. Not in 2025, now 2024, which is a lot for a year. And especially in the modern country, it should not be like blackouts, even though sometimes there wasn't even wind. Out of them 6 times, probably 4 times were just because blackouts, pretty much, because they didn't have enough electricity, pretty much. And the other 2 times because of storms. Thankfully, it's not that bad here in Cavan, as I say, but if a tree usually causes it, that's usually what causes the whole issue in County Cavan, and in rural, in particular this part of Ireland. But it shouldn't really be an issue. And particularly as we've seen with the recent snowstorm, particularly, now it was bad. It was very bad down in Cork and Kerry. Nobody's disputing that. But long story short, it should be really electricity system, etc., etc., should be immune, because again, unfortunately, especially just going back to the snow, there was a lot of people who have heat pumps, etc., etc., who run on electricity. And obviously they couldn't heat their home or to do anything because the electricity was gone to the house for a good few days, and etc., etc. Shouldn't be the case. So that's why I say we should look into other ways of trying to keep electricity going, etc., etc., doing storms, etc., etc., underground wires, etc., etc., instead of above ground wires, things like that. Because it's insane that a bit of wind can come along and just knock out half the country, pretty much, and especially businesses too. I can't tell you that there was a few times in Cavan Town it happened. Many businesses lost a lot of money because they couldn't trade, they couldn't open. Not to mention a lot of schools in Cavan too. A few times, the power didn't work. They couldn't go to school because the children would have to be in a classroom where it was lit, etc., etc. They couldn't just sit in a dark classroom all day. So we have to think about that, because we have to look at that, because we can't really allow that to continue to be done, especially if there's loads of storms. Particularly in the winter time, during the summer it's lovely, you have the odd storm, a summer storm maybe, But in the winter time you had a lot of storms, etc., etc. That does happen. Not mainly snowstorms. Again, what we see with snow, it doesn't happen that frequently. It's more the wind, obviously, being the Atlantic. The first thing it's going to hit is Ireland more than if, say, Luxembourg or Germany. Things that has to come from Ireland across England to go to Germany. So the weaker the storm gets, if that makes any sense. So the more land it hits, the more weaker it gets because it's stopped by stuff. That's why you see when it even comes inland as far as Cavan, or as far as Monaghan and Roscommon, and Roscommon will be a bit different, but it gets weaker because obviously the coast is taking the most bad one around Cork, Kerry, Galway, Clare, Sligo even too, Mayo too. Forgot. But yeah, so we should look at that because the electricity supply is atrocious. Any kind of weather at all, any bad weather at all, causes it just to completely collapse and fall in on itself. And it shouldn't really be the case. It really, really shouldn't be, and especially the blackouts, as I say. But that's to do with the data set that's using up the whole country's electricity, which is true. Like literally, one data set nearly uses up the whole electricity of our whole country. Think about that for a second, because it's just taking so much energy. It's literally ludicrous to be told, Lindsay. But we do have to take it serious. Energy is serious, and we see it in the United States. Take for example, the moment Donald Trump is taking energy very serious. One of I think the second thing he needed done was declare an energy emergency in the United States of America. And even though people are paying a lot of money in energy bills, don't get me wrong, they're probably paying. I think it's actually there was a thing done last year that Ireland is nearly paid. Irish people are paying more than any other country in the European Union for electricity, and that probably is true. To be told, Lindsay. So we see what happens, but again, we have to think about it going forward. And obviously, there's no stopping this tomorrow. The storm hopefully won't be that bad, but we do have to look into it for the future because we can't be living with constant blackouts. Or if, say, for example, the storms, every once in a while. Still, with that, we should be not worried at all about anybody losing power, etc. So there should be ways around that. So we have to look into that. We do really have to look into that. Because it shouldn't happen really in the first world country. It shouldn't really happen that if a storm comes, if it's terribly bad maybe, but a lot of it is just a bit of wind sometimes, and that's what happens because the batteries fall on the power lines, and it's all to do with the screen party. But anyway, thank you for watching. Let me know what you think and subscribe more, and bye.